Hey friend, quick pause here. If you're finding these conversations helpful, I would love to stay connected beyond the podcast. You can sign up for my free newsletter at tabithawestbrook.com. And that's where I share exclusive trauma-informed insight, faith-friendly resources, and updates on new Hey Tabby episodes, retreats, healing tools, all kinds of good stuff that you will not find anywhere else. It's one small way to keep growing together toward peace, wholeness, and freedom. Just head over to tabithawestbrook.com and click on Hey Tabby, and you will scroll down and find the newsletter sign up there. I look forward to seeing you in the emails. Welcome to Hey Tabby, the podcast where we talk about the hard things out loud with our actual lips. We'll cover all kinds of topics across the mental health spectrum, including how it intersects with the Christian faith. Nothing is off limits here, and we are not take two verses and call me in the morning. I'm Tabitha Westbrook, and I'm a licensed trauma therapist, but I'm not your trauma therapist. I'm an expert in domestic abuse and coercive control, and how complex trauma impacts our health and well-being. Our focus here is knowledge and healing. Trauma doesn't have to eat your lunch forever. There is hope. Now, let's get going. Welcome to this week's episode of Hey Tabby, and I'm super, super excited that you're here, and I am super, super excited to be with one of my friends here that some of you might know, but if you don't, you're going to get to know her because she is amazing. This is Beth Broom. She is a licensed professional counselor supervisor. She's a certified clinical trauma care professional level 2. She is the executive director of Bridgehaven Counseling Associates in Durham, North Carolina, where she and her team offer counseling for trauma, healing, grief, depression, family and couple care, anxiety, OCD, and other struggles. Basically, if you got it, they help you. Beth is the founder and director of the Christian Trauma Healing Network, which is a nonprofit organization designed to bring trauma care and healing to Christians in the church and in society. She also co-hosts the very awesome podcast, Counsel for Life, which engages in conversations about mental health and the Christian life. And she is the author of 10 Questions About Pain and Suffering, 30 Devotions for Kids, Teens, and Families. That was published by Crossway. Beth, welcome.
Thank you. So glad to be with you, Tabby.
It's so exciting to be here, and it's just good to see your face. It's always good to see your face. I always just love being around you. You are a wise and fun woman, which is always such a cool combination. Let's jump in and talk about your book. Your book is, I love that it's for children, teens, and families. And I would take it one step further and say for people in general. What brought you to write this devotional?
Well, it definitely was not my plan necessarily. I was actually approached by a dear friend who works with Crossway, and he had started the series. His name's Champ Thornton, and he wrote the first book in the series called 10 Questions About Salvation. So the goal of the series is to create a set of devotions for kids, teens, and families on topics that are hard to understand. Basically, it's like it's theology, deep theology at a level that kids can understand. And so he wrote the salvation book. He approached me one year at a conference and just said, hey, if you were going to write a book for kids and teens, what would it be about? And I said, well, suffering. And then, lo and behold, it wasn't too long that he invited me to consider actually doing it. And then I thought, what was I thinking? This is really hard. I mean, I talk about suffering all the time with people and with kids, but writing it down, and by the way, each devotion is 300 words. So you pick a verse like Romans 5, where he talks about rejoicing in our suffering because suffering produces hope, hope, endurance, hope, that kind of thing. And it's like, wow, that's a really hard passage. And if you're in the middle of suffering, it does not feel good. It stings. So how do I talk about that with children, with illustrations and wording that kids can understand? Oh, by the way, I only get 300 words. It was tough, but it was a really great project. It was great for my soul. It was beautiful to get to think about the combination of my two worlds, like the combining of my two worlds, because before I was a counselor, I was an elementary school teacher. So I love kids. I love talking to kids. And so it was really fun project, very hard project, but fun. So I kind of got pulled into it. But then, man, I'm so grateful to have written it. And you're right. I mean, you said it's for people. I've received a lot of feedback from adults who said, I got this book for my kid. But then I read it and I was like, oh, I need to, like, I don't understand these things. I want to actually dig into these concepts. And it's in language that's very simple. It's in bite-sized pieces. So people who are struggling deeply, it's a little easier to digest, because it's small sections. So, yeah, I mean, it ended up being wider than what the title actually indicates.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll just give an example of one of the questions where I was like, oh, and it's question 5 in the book, which is, when Christians suffer, is it punishment? And that is a question that everybody asks. Whether you're a kid, whether you're an adult, it doesn't matter, because it can feel that way, especially if, some of your choices led to suffering. It's like, oh, well, God's just punishing me. And so in 300 words, you have to unpack this deep topic. Oh my goodness, I can see how hard that would be.
Yes, it was definitely hard. And honestly, so I've had people ask me, you know, what's the best way to use this? Do you just hand it to a kid? No. So my recommendation is a parent and a kid read it together, and then the reflection questions and like the concepts, giving a space to talk it out. Because I think even, as a mom myself, it's like sometimes I need like a hook or like a little bit of information to go before I try to have that hard conversation with my kid. And so this provides just a little bit of the almost like setting the table for the conversation. And so, yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. The other thing is, I often tell people, hey, it'd be great if you could read this before big suffering hits instead of waiting until after, because once it's after, you've already started to develop some of these potentially false beliefs. And, the confusion leads to doubt, or the confusion leads to finding an answer that's not correct, that kind of stuff. So let's learn these things as best we can when we're not actually in the middle of suffering.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's challenging for sure. And I tried to choose questions that I get from adults all the time, as well, because you're right, it is universal.
Yeah. And, for so many people who have been spiritually abused, experienced church hurt, and things like that, entering back in with God can feel really risky and tricky. And one thing I really like about this particular devotional is it doesn't spiritually bypass. It's very honest in how you did it. It's age appropriate to littler children, but it's so approachable for people who maybe you're like, I don't know how I feel right now.
Yeah, I tried. And honestly, one of the things the editor said was, you're a little bit redundant in this particular area. And I was like, yeah, that's on purpose. Redundant in the area of God is near. God loves you. Whatever you might feel about him being far away or not caring, um, is potentially a temptation towards something that's not true, right? So how do we continue to beat the drum? I mean, that was the drum that, or actually 2 drums that I beat throughout the book, that my editor said, hey, you're saying this too much. I'm like, sorry, this is what we're gonna do. And fortunately, they were like, great, it's fine, you can stay there. But the 2 things, that the God is near, he loves you, he wants to bind up the brokenhearted. He loves that. That's who he is. And then secondly, you're not alone, and you're not meant to walk alone. And what does it look like to allow others to come alongside you? And then one of my favorite sections in there of the question is, how do I help somebody else? So even kids, they can come alongside someone else who's suffering. And 2 Corinthians 1, comfort someone else with the comfort with which they've received. And that idea of community in the midst of suffering was the other thing that I just beat all throughout the book. But you're right. I was trying so hard not to. I mean, we don't need platitudes in this area. We don't need quick fix answers or trite responses to things like this. These are really hard things that require a lot of wrestling. And so we need to be able to have the honest conversation. So I tried. It was hard. It was really hard. If I'd had double the number of words, in the book, it would have been a little easier, I think. But I was trying to condense it and keep it tight.
Yeah, absolutely. As a therapist, one of the ways I like to use this particular book is to bring an embodied element to it, which you already have a fair amount of in there, realistically. But there are some things, some of the reflections that lend themselves to an art project. And I really love that. I love that for kids and for adults, because it exercises a different part of your brain than just your thinky parts, right? We
Mm-hmm.
get back into that limbic system. We have the act of creation along with the thinking, which I think helps things root into our souls much better than just like, I can talk to you about it. And there's so much value in talking and in sharing stories and in thinking, but there is immense value in that holistic perspective of, and let me also involve my body in understanding this truth in a different way or wrestling with this truth. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Hey Tabby, and we will be right back to this episode. You know, here on Hey Tabby, we talk a lot about the hard stuff, trauma, abuse, and the toll that it takes on your mind, body, and spirit. And I want you to know you don't have to walk that alone. At The Journey in the Process, our team of highly trained trauma therapists help people heal from the deep wounds of complex trauma, all kinds of abuse, coercive control, sexual harm, and problematic sexual behaviors. We don't just manage symptoms. We work with your whole self, your mind, your body, and your spirit, using evidence-based approaches like EMDR, brain spotting, somatic experiencing, and internal family systems to help you find deep healing. Whether you're in North Carolina or Texas, we can meet with you in person or through secure telehealth sessions. We also have personalized intensives if you're in another area, and you can come to us in Texas or North Carolina and do that deep work over several days. Regardless of how we connect, we strive to make this a safe, judgment-free space where your story is heard, your pain is honored, and your healing is possible. If you're ready to take that next step toward peace, visit www.thejourneyandtheprocess.com, and we'll have that linked in the description as well. Trauma doesn't have to eat your lunch forever. There is hope, and we are here to help you find it. Now, let's get back to this week's episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I tried to include, here's some things you can do, to kind of exercise these concepts, but even some of the illustrations that I gave, even allowing a child to draw. For example, one of the illustrations that I give is the idea of, with God allowing suffering to happen. What does that look like? What does that mean? And so I use the illustration of like the earth has an atmosphere, but it's limited. And you can see it from space. The ring around the edges of the earth is the atmosphere. Think of that almost like the enemy has power, but it's limited. He's the prince of the power of the air, but God tells him where to stop. There's only so far he can go. And so even allowing a child to just saying like something like, let's draw that. And now let's talk it out while you're drawing, like talk out. What do you think about God, God allowing suffering to happen? This is a really hard topic, and drawing something very practical and real, but then being able to move towards like, what is it like for you? What colors would you use to describe what it feels like to suffer and to feel alone? And I've had kids even we almost do like a portrait of you and God, and like, where are you sitting? Where is God sitting? How would you draw that to kind of illustrate this idea of, do I feel near to God? Do I feel far away from God? Am I looking at him? Am I looking away from him? These kinds of like artistic types of things that we can do with kids to just allow them to explore. Because again, this is a wrestle that we have to do. It's not information that they need to download. It's very emotional.
Yeah. And I think as a parent, so whether you're a therapist going through this with a client, whether you're a parent going through it with a kiddo, or a parent going through it for yourself, like, sometimes I know my experience as a parent when I get those tough questions and I'm in the middle of suffering myself or struggling, because things happen in families where we experience traumatic events as a family, and we all are going to have to process it in our own way. And so that is a way for you and your children and spouse and, friends and whatever, your community, to wrestle together with it. And, I always encourage parents, like, don't dictate the colors that people use, because that is a fascinating study in general. One of my favorite things to ask people is, where do you feel it? What color is it? And what shape would you say it is? Whatever it is in your body, whatever feeling. And then drawing it out. And, I might think of sad as blue, but my client might write it as yellow or green. And so to say, tell me why you chose that color, is so interesting and fascinating to hear how they're working it through their body in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just say to any parents listening, if they make the, atmosphere around the earth like hot pink,
Yeah.
just be curious and be like,
Yeah.
maybe they just like that color. If they're 5, they might just be like, that is how I saw it in my head. There
Totally.
are, like we do not need to like distill it down to what it should be in our mind,
Mm-hmm.
but to let the other person have that experience of whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you said about, you were talking about parents and we experience suffering together as a family. That's something that I've considered a lot and thought about. It's not really part of the book, but it was some feedback that I got and some conversations I had post writing the book from people who'd read it. This idea that like, okay, as a parent, let's say we've lost a family member tragically, the kid needs to be able to process that, but I'm processing it too. I'm really hurting. So everything my kid says about it stings so much. Like I feel it deeply in so how am I going to be there for them when I'm really having a very hard time? And so I've just been thinking a lot about, and I talk a lot about in various settings, the idea of like, okay, but you need your own support system and you also need your connection to the Father to be able to work those things out. And I mean, I think we don't give kids enough credit. Like they know when we're suffering. So why lie to them? Why try to like put on a brave face and pretend that you're not affected? Actually, that's the opposite of helpful. They actually need to see that we are human people and that we're having a hard time too, without us making them responsible or putting on them a feeling of like, oh, I need to make mom feel better or whatever. That is not healthy. But to be able to just say, hey, yeah, this is hard for me too. I'm having a hard time too. Let's be in this together. And to give parents the freedom to not feel like they have to kind of like put on the armor so that they can care for their kid. But they also need their own place to process. And the kid is not the person to do that with. Something, like their little brains and bodies and emotions are not meant to carry heavy, heavy loads that adults carry. So having other adults that can come alongside you in your suffering so that you're able to do that processing work. And then when you're with your kid, you can just be honest and say, I'm having a hard time too. So I think that's a really important aspect of communal suffering.
Absolutely. I think it is where, the authenticity of I am suffering also, and I'm going to get my own support. And that's true even if your kids are older teenagers or adults, right? It is not appropriate for parents to use their children as a crutch, right? And I think we sometimes do it because they're like a safe person. I see a lot of parents do this. In trauma care, this is something you see frequently because there's no playbook for this stuff. There's no we don't have a tragic experience or series of them or years of them, decades of them, depending on what's happened. And you get a little playbook of, and now here's your recovery plan, and here's what you do, and here's what you don't do, and all of that. And I think the temptation can be there because you love this person, they are a safe person to you. Kids genuinely want their parents to be happy no matter how old they are, right? Like we always want to please mom and dad and the caregivers in our life most of the time. And so we can end up in a place, if we're not being mindful, that we're putting our kiddo in a position that they're not meant for. And so that is no criticism to parents. We all can do it, but to look at it and go, if I am doing this, I need to maybe make a shift.
Yeah, for sure. Because I do think there is that. Parents, we're so used to pouring out to our children, and it's a pretty thankless job if we're honest, oftentimes. So to have it could feel really good to have your kid take care of you for a change, or to go out of their way to, do something kind. And often that behavior is praised, right? Like it's seen as, oh, what a loving kid. And it's like, well, they might be doing it because they're afraid. They might be doing it because they feel like responsible, like it's their job. This is not healthy. I think, and even in my own history, there's a member of my family that after I had children, anytime they would say goodbye to my kids, they would say, take care of mommy. I'm like, nope, 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 not your job, not your job. So, but it is a common thing, right? To be kind and do whatever. And I don't even know if she meant take care of me, but it's like, that can be construed as, oh, it's their job to make sure that I'm okay. And it's not. So I think you're right. It is a temptation. It's an understandable temptation to be like, oh, it sure would feel good if my kid would write me a sweet note. I love you, mommy. Have a great day. That would be awesome. And yet they're not responsible for my emotions.
Absolutely. And look, if your kids do write you a sweet note, mommy, have a great day, or daddy, have a great day, or whatever, that's not also doesn't mean you're doing
Right.
something wrong or that
That's
there's a
right.
problem. So it's so easy to get off the middle path at time for, just living life. And I think parents who care can definitely get turned into a giant pretzel, essentially, when they're like, I don't want to do too much or too little or gosh. And like, there's so many people that will just shame your parenting, whether they should or not. And so I think a lot of it comes down to intentionality, taking a deep breath, and the art of repair when you mess it
Yep.
up, because we will mess
Totally.
it up as parents.
That's right. Yep. They can also, in the same way they can sense our suffering, they can also sense our franticness and anxiety of like the nervousness of doing the wrong thing or seeming like we're this or that. It's like, oh my goodness, like I think of family. I say this all the time to my kids. We're a team. Our family is a team. And my role, maybe I'm the quarterback or I'm the guard on the basketball team. But that doesn't mean that everybody else doesn't also have things they're doing, and we're trying to function together for a specific purpose moving forward. So that means I'm going to make mistakes. Just because I'm the quarterback doesn't mean that I'm always going to get it right. So I'm going to have to ask forgiveness and seek repair. And I think I heard it said that good parents get it right about 50% of the time, and the other 50% they know how to repair and ask forgiveness. And that was so comforting to me.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think, depending on the house that you grew up in, you may not have had repair modeled to you. I know in the household that I grew up in, like there was never, and I'm sorry, there was never, it might be, I'm sorry you feel that way, but it wasn't, like I really messed that up. I blew it. And that is really damaging. And so if you're like, I don't want to do it that way, you might also start, and this is true for so many trauma survivors, apologizing for breathing. I mean, trauma survivors do that anyway.
Yep.
And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, breathing is allowed. And,
Yeah.
let's look at, did you actually do something that warrants a repair? And sometimes that is something that you have to learn over time is, this is where I do need to ask for repair and lean into repair and do some work there. Or this is where I don't. And sometimes, and this is an interesting thing as your children get older, you don't know what you might need to repair for that you blew when they were younger, because in the moment they didn't know. And then they go to therapy themselves and they're like, yeah, that was not helpful. And then you have to go, ooh, and this is, I think we're seeing this in the estrangement culture. Now, some kids, they absolutely need to have boundaries where they go no contact without question. I've seen some of those families where I would say, yes, this is warranted. It's appropriate. It's horrible. And then there are some where I'm like, maybe you went a little too fast on that one. And, but for parents, like when you are suddenly getting complaints leveled against you, you're like, what is happening? And I don't remember that. And you don't know what to do. And so I would just encourage parents to take a breath and like hear what your kiddo is saying if they're bringing something to you. And even if you don't remember it, if it's something that stuck out to them, then maybe just go, wow, like that was certainly not my intent. And I'm really sorry. And like sit with it, even though it's uncomfortable. Because I think sometimes our bent is to defend ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and if a child, even like an adult child, but certainly a teenage or younger child, comes to their parent and says, this hurt me, what a gift. Like I think based on sitting in counseling sessions with people, probably 80 to 90% of the time, these people they're not telling the other party, hey, this hurt. Like if you're saying that, there's two reasons you could be doing it. One, you just want to accuse and drop a hammer, or you're actually hoping for something better. So like I find that a lot of people when they're confronting parents, especially later in life, it's like they're actually trying to create repair. So on the receiving end of that, it's like, wow, I want to be grateful that they're not over there just thinking about what a horrible person I am. They're actually coming to me so that we can try to do something new to change the pattern. What a gift that could be. Now, there are people that confront in order to drop a hammer, and that's a different scenario. We as counselors when we see that with our clients, we go, okay, that's your moment of like, let's take a breath and, let's think about what's the motive here and what do you want it to produce in the end? But yeah, I mean, the opportunity, I know for me, even both as a counselor and also as a staff member of a church, when somebody would come to me and say, hey, you hurt me. Oh my gosh. I mean, hard to hear, but I'm so glad. I'd rather that than for you to go, leave a Google review or something,
Right.
or go tell all your friends what a terrible person I am without giving me the opportunity to ask forgiveness, to humble myself. So, man, I hope that for parents, I think obviously we see that modeled in scripture, what it looks like to actually do that kind of work of creating repair. And I know little kids, it's different for little kids, but as they get older, we do want to create environments that are conducive for honest conversation all across the board, right? And to be able to recognize that this kid is going to start thinking for himself or herself, and I would rather be in earshot of that. I'd rather be within earshot of that. And if I am super defensive every time they come to me and they're frustrated, they're going to learn. I'm teaching them. They're going to learn that I am not a person they can talk to. And so over time, we want to, and also, I've talked to parents who are like, it's too late. I've already done that. And now the kid, I'm like, yes, but this is what's beautiful. There's so much pliability in that relationship. You actually can start small. You can ask forgiveness, and then you can start trying to be a listening ear, to have an open door for your kids, and to provide spaces. And honestly, I tell parents, provide the spaces that are not high risk, right? It's literally like you go upstairs and you see your kid playing a video game and you sit down and say, what's this about? Like, tell me what you're playing. What do you love about this? What are the characters like? Which is your favorite kid? Like, just knowing the things they care about speaks volumes that I care about the things you care about. And that then can lead into deeper things. It's not too late. Like, I like to tell parents that all the time. It's not too late.
It's not. Yeah. And even with your older teenagers, like, look, here's the deal. They're going to come into your room at 11 p.m. to have this deep conversation.
Right.
When
you're
you were
exhausted.
trying to sleep and
Yeah.
have to get up at 5 a.m. And that is, like, we think all of the not sleeping happens when they're babies. Not true. A lot of it happens when they're 17, because there's a lot going on there in that process of differentiation, which isn't a bad thing, right? And this is hard for me as a parent. I think it's hard for every parent. Maybe there are parents who are like, no, that was the easiest time of my life. Well, God bless you, because it was not for me, but like, where your kid may feel very differently than you about a lot of things. And how do you have that space when they are not artful bringer uppers, right? Because they haven't learned that skill, and they're not teaching interpersonal effectiveness in high school, which I wish they would. But gosh, man, could we teach people how to people? That would be a 10 out of 10 for me.
That would be awesome.
But they come in and it's a messy introduction to whatever's happening. And you're like, I don't know what's going on, and they may feel very passionately about something, especially in this world where there's so much feedback and so much stuff happening, and all the TikToks and Reels and Snapchats and all the things, and come in and just be like, I can't believe fill in the blank. And you're just like, well, I wasn't planning on having a deep political and sociological
based off of something you saw on TikTok, which often is not even correct.
11:30 p.m.
Right.
Which, I mean, I'm no good after 8 p.m. This is why I do not do therapy late in the day, because that would be good for exactly no one. And, but as a parent, you got to hold space with it. And I think those are those immediate prayers that we do. Jesus, help, where it's just like, I don't know what to do. God, help me out. And then to hold that space. And right now there's such divisiveness, division in languaging, even, with some of those TikToks. So if your kid comes to you and is like, with all of the things, then to not get activated yourself, or to tell them it's a poorly thought out political argument or whatever it might be for you in the moment, that to just sit and hold that space and go.
Yeah. And I will. Yeah. And that's, I think, I say this to couples. I say this to parents. We talk about it with, in these scenarios, it's like, whatever they're bringing to you at 11 p.m., it's a bid for connection. More than, like, yes, they may want to talk about a political thing or a thing that happened at school or circumstances. But if I can keep in my brain, okay, this is about us. This is about us making a connection before I'm correcting you or talking about something intellectual. I'm connecting with the fact that you feel something very strongly. You are having a strong response And you're bringing that to me, which means you're trusting me with something very vulnerable in this moment. So let me do that first. It's not that we won't ever get to talking about politics or whatever, but in that first few moments, I think what we do is we're defining who we are in that moment. I'm your biggest fan. I'm your greatest advocate. I'm with you, regardless of what you're feeling, even if it's incorrect. I'll put that in air quotes because, there's no such thing. But this idea of like, I'm feeling this because of something that I read, which the thing I read was incorrect. Okay, but you're still feeling it. Something in you has been poked. And I don't want to keep poking that thing in a different direction. I want to actually lean in. Now, can I just pause and say, I'm not good at this sometimes. Like as parents, it's like, especially if it's something we feel deeply about in a different direction, suddenly we're in an argument. Right. And we're missing that idea that connection can come first. I'm bad at it too, especially late at night. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And that
I hit about 9:00 and I'm like, nope.
Yep.
No more hard conversation, no more emotions. Everyone needs to calm down and go to sleep.
Right. I will take this back up with you at 8 a.m. tomorrow.
Yeah.
And sometimes that actually is the right answer, like to say, I hear you. And gosh, this is such a conversation I really want to have. I can't have my best conversation with you at 11:30 p.m. Can you think about this a bit more? I'd love to hear more about it. Let's talk tomorrow. Do you want to grab ice cream? Because man, if it's an older teenager, we're not doing an 8 a.m. conversation either. Let's be real. Maybe you're the teenager that gets up at 5. Most don't, and so maybe we go, hey, let's get ice cream in the afternoon when everybody's at their best, and let's bring this up more and talk more about it. And I think as parents, especially as kids get older, it is so hard to move from I need to be more directive to I need to be more of a coach. And when they're little, it's like, hey, we still try to give them choices like, would you like this outfit or this outfit? And so, but there's still more of a container and there's more of a I need you to do this, or we have to put our shoes on, or those kinds of things. But when they get older, especially when they're getting close to leaving our house and going to college or whatever they're going to do, going into the workforce, to say, I'm going to coach you more when we're so used to being more of a manager. And that's a shift that we have to think about, and it brings grief. And that's another thing I tell parents often is that change is going to bring sadness because they're not where they used to be. They're not your littles anymore. They'll always be your baby, right? Hopefully you love them like that. But there is that I'm also opening my hand, and you may make some choices that I'm not good with, but I always tell families connection before correction.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and if I think about as a former school teacher, the younger kids, you're teaching them a lot more information. The older they get, you're teaching them critical thinking skills where they can do it themselves. And that's what we're doing in life too. So if you have your teenager coming in and saying, well, I read this online and this thing that's going on in the world, it's making me really mad. And they've got tunnel vision, because that's a thing that we all experience. But teenagers, wow, it's real easy because they just don't know the world yet. They don't understand. So the tunnel vision that's happening, to be able to give them opportunity to talk that out and widen their view of it for the sake of wisdom. This is going to happen for the rest of your life. You're going to see something. You're going to feel angry. You're not going to know what to do. You're going to feel helpless, anxious. So how do you choose wisdom in those moments? And until the second they turn 18 and move out of my house, if I'm telling them what wisdom is and saying, just believe me, they're not going to develop that skill. So giving them the opportunity to actually talk it out, think it out, inviting them to consider other options and, get some peripheral vision about this thing that you're struggling with. That is good and right. And you're right. There is grief. I remember the first time with my daughter when, man, I wanted to just come in and rescue her. I was ready. She was in 8th grade. And I mean, it was a situation where I was like, I'm going to come in and I'm Mama Bear, right? And I felt the Holy Spirit prompting me, just give it a second. Ask her, what do you think is wise in this situation? And it was a relational situation that was very toxic. And she said, I think I need to remove this person from my phone. I think I need to not be a part of that person's life anymore. And it's hard and painful, but I need to get rid of it. I was like, Yes, she did. Like, if I had told her to do that, if I had stepped in and dropped the hammer as a mama bear, she would not have had the opportunity to actually decide that for herself. Now, sometimes our kids choose what is unwise, which is really painful. That's a whole different thing. But in that moment, she made a good decision. And I wasn't making it for her. And that was a huge defining moment that we actually pointed back to throughout high school. Like, you remember that? And like, that was such a wise decision. You saw the after effects of that and how good that was. What you made that was a wise choice. Like, it just was a great foundation that got built. And honestly, I was ready to do the totally wrong thing. The Lord had to stop me in my tracks in that moment. Because as parents, we really do. Like, we that instinct to step in and fix it or make sure it goes a certain way. You just can do that less and less the older they get.
Absolutely. And that is a place of tension for us as parents. And if a parent is listening and is like, yeah, I don't do that very well, and I like get really freaked out and then I can't function and all of those things, there may be stories in your own life that have led you to that place, right? So if your parents were incredibly permissive and you ended up in really bad places because they were just so neglectful, then you may have to learn like where healthy boundaries lie. When do you mama bear? When do you not mama bear? And things like that, or daddy bear,
Yeah.
whichever bear you may be,
Yeah.
that, those things might take some discernment. And that is where getting a good coach or a counselor can be incredibly helpful to just go, I need to disentangle some of my own stuff because it's impacting how I'm able to enter in and I'm having a hard time with it. And that's a beautiful place to be. That is, a really wise choice. And it doesn't mean you're failing or a terrible parent or that you're weak or any of those things. It means that you're wise and you're following what it says in Proverbs about getting good counsel. Jesus did in fact put that in there for us so that we can go, that's not a bad idea, which is such a gift, right? And then you get some feedback from someone who's not in your actual head or in your immediate life, which gives people a little more, space to have a different perspective and to invite you into a different perspective or to consider. And good counseling does exactly that. Like, I don't tell people what to do most of the time. Now, there's a couple times where I'm like, that would be a really bad idea because it's something quite dangerous or whatever. But at the end of the day, a counselor says, here's some ways that you can critically think, or here's how this might be playing out in your life and how you're hearing these things. And like, let's explore that together. And they're not going to be directive.
Yes, that's good. I often think that there's so much there is so much shame connected to us. I think parenting is an area where the enemy just loves to poke us with shame. But I think this idea that, it's too late. I've already ruined my relationship with my kid. They don't respect and trust me, and I understand why, or like this or that. Like this kind of talk, which by the way, in and of itself is making it worse, right? Like the way we talk to ourselves can make it worse. But also one of the things that I love to do in counseling is to help counselees consider that there's something more going on here. It's what you were saying, something more going on here than just you don't know what you're doing as a parent, or you're bad. You don't care. You must not care. Like these interpretations we make of our behavior. If I'm yelling at my kid, just as an example. So like if my kid drops something and it's loud and I yell at them and then I'm angry and shaming myself because they didn't do anything sinful. Why am I that way? If I go to counseling and my counselor says, well, I mean, yes, it doesn't mean you don't need to ask forgiveness. If you yelled at your kid, you definitely want to create repair there. But what was actually happening in that moment? Oh, I wonder if you were overstimulated. I wonder if the noise and the mess was too much for you in that moment and in a response. So that idea of like, let's consider your whole body, your whole existence. Oh, by the way, did your dad scream at you when you dropped stuff when you were a kid? Oh, that might matter. All of these things that are just sort of filling out stuff that we don't necessarily think about by ourselves, but having somebody else kind of go, I wonder what else is going on. And then to validate and go, actually, that really matters. And it's not an excuse for yelling at your kid, but it certainly helps us map out what's going on so that we can then seek healing and growth, uproot some of those false beliefs, plant truth, like all this stuff that we get to do. That's so fun. It's just such a fun thing to do in counseling. And I sort of watch sometimes the shame like lift off of somebody when they're like, oh, I don't need to just automatically call myself a bad parent. There's other things happening that are influencing how I'm functioning. And I'd rather heal that completely than to just slap myself on the wrist every time I do it in hopes that I won't do it again. Right?
Yes.
It's not just about behavior modification.
Right. It's the root cause, right? Like, and when I worked in clinical research a million years ago before I became a therapist, we would look for root cause analysis. What caused the problem? Not what do I think caused the problem, but like, let me look at all the data around it to figure out how we got here. And so in counseling, I refer to it as what makes this make sense. And when we can figure a lot of that out, then we can uproot those things and go, let's heal what happened to you in childhood or in this traumatic experience or whatever it is that is pushing that the faulty belief that you have about you and the way of the world and whatever it is. And we can do some real change there. Now, my friend Matt Winger, who's the clinical director at Begin Again Institute, says it this way: the water's going to go where the ditch is dug. And what I've told counselees for years is, we're rerouting the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon, and we're digging out the canyon wall with a freaking teaspoon. And so it takes a minute and it feels like things will never change, but it does, because eventually we get that river rerouted as we learn new things, as we experience ourselves differently, as we're healed. And then the river does go in a different direction. And in that process of digging, we have to have a lot of grace.
Yes. Grace and compassion, treating ourselves as friends. That's a hard concept, I think, as believers. But treating yourself as a friend, like you would never talk to your friend the way you talk to yourself, or your kid. You never talk to your kid the way you talk to yourself. And we don't even realize the kinds of messages that we're speaking of ourselves. And in that, if I may take it to a spiritual place, our enemy actually is over there going, feeling pretty victorious, right? Like, I often say I don't really need his help to screw my life up, but he's involved, right? Like we do have an enemy who tries to accentuate the flesh, yes, and make the flesh louder than the spirit. And so that passage that talks about that we have to feed the spirit and starve the flesh. Like, what does it look like for us to lean into the truth? And it's so interesting because I've been thinking so much and doing so much work personally, but then also as I work with clients on, what does it mean for us to truly believe in who God actually is? And I think we talk about that theologically a lot. Like, you need to believe in his sovereignty, and you need to believe in his kindness and all these things, right? Like, we need to believe in the things that he is, the attributes of God. And at the same time, I think, when Jesus says he wants us to pray that we will increase our faith, and even when he tells his disciples that their faith is small, it's connected to their lack of understanding of how much he loves them.
Yes.
Like this, so faith is deeply tied to, if you would want to talk about believing in God, like having faith, the greatest, like one of the great, I don't know, maybe it is the greatest, I don't know, I'm still parsing it out, but I'm thinking about like one of the greatest areas of faith that needs to grow is how much he loves us. Like yes. Paul prays that over the Ephesians church. I pray that you will be rooted and grounded in love, that you would understand the height and width and depth and length of the love of Christ, and that you'd flourish in that and know his love, like really know it. That's Paul's prayer for the church, that you would know the love of Christ. So if we really knew how much he loved us, if we studied that, if we meditated on that, how much would that fuel our confidence, our ability to see ourselves kindly, to see others kindly, like to be able to function and walk in victory and freedom and to heal? It's, I don't know. I've just been thinking a lot about that like when I pray that God will increase my faith, one of the things I'm automatically praying for is that I will increase in my understanding of who he is. And who is he? He's love. He's love.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is such a key thing. And I think sometimes we think, if I just study that, then nothing is really going to change. But I don't know. Orienting ourselves to the truth of God is incredibly changing. And I know in good ways. And I know for some people who've been really harmed with scripture, that can be really tough because it's been weaponized, right? I always tell folks, sword of the Spirit was not meant to stab other people. That is not what we're supposed to do with it. And so if that's been your experience, I know that it can be hard, but that is where devotional books like yours, the Jesus Storybook Bible, Jen Lyle's The Promises of God Children's Bible, all of those are really helpful if you maybe can't pick up, an adult Bible and look at parts of scripture at this moment, that there are ways to orient yourself to God's truth that feel less disruptive to your body and to your nervous system while you work toward recovery. And so
Yes.
I just encourage folks, like, we don't want Satan to take away what is true goodness. And we don't want to let the abuser who weaponized your good faith, to win in this regard. We don't want to give the enemy that. We want to gently and maybe sometimes super slowly lean back in, even if it's just in little bits and pieces. And we run a lot of groups at our practice. And one of our favorites is this group Restore, which is like, how do I deal with what got upended in my relationship with God? And we've had multiple participants basically be like, dude, when I started this group, I was ready to throw my Bible across the room. In fact, I might have done that a few times. And as they gently enter back in, like, it is life changing for them, because they're like, I am now able to reorient to the God who loves me and is not at all like my abuser. And that is a very powerful place, or like the church that harmed me or whatever. And that is taking back ground that the enemy tried to steal from
Absolutely.
you,
Absolutely.
And so I think that's so beautiful.
And it's okay that it's baby steps. It's the teaspoon, digging out the Grand Canyon with a teaspoon. It's okay that that's what it is. And sometimes I'll, clients who've experienced incredible, vast spiritual abuse, church hurt, things like that. I'll take a passage like, I believe it's Isaiah 34, where it says that the Lord will pick up his lambs in his arms and carry them in his bosom. I'll just read that. It's such a vivid image. And just say, does that poke you? What do you think about that? Like, can you picture it? Have you ever seen God in that way? It's right there in the Bible. So like, we can't really say, oh, that's not who God is. There it is right there. And so even just giving that space to have a 5-minute conversation about like, oh, I'm struggling to believe that. Okay, can you just for a moment, can you picture what would it feel like if that was true? What would it feel like if you were in his bosom? Would that feel good? Would it not feel? It might not. So then let's just wrestle. So that's that wrestle again. It's the opening of the door to allow for, and I just don't think it's wise to do that by yourself, especially if you've had a lot of spiritual abuse, church hurt, things like that. Like if you can find someone who seems a little bit safe and start that conversation, or go to counseling where it's their job, hopefully, to be safe. Please, Lord Jesus, let that be true.
Yes.
So if that, you find that space where you actually can do that wrestling in a place where there's, you're not at a lot of risk, that is a good place to start. And I just don't recommend people think like, oh, I'm going to just do this work by myself, because it's real easy to, I think you used an analogy of like to sort of move off to one side or the other of the path. It's really easy to do that anyway, but especially if you're trying to do that work alone, and it can also be really discouraging. You probably need another human voice to say, you're doing it. Like, look, you're doing it. Look how far we've come. So that you're seeing truth and having somebody speak that into your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Healing happens in community, and how you rebuild your community, especially if your faith community betrayed you, is a slow process, 100%. Do it gently, but I definitely agree with finding a safe counselor, even a safe biblical counselor who does not suck. We have some on our team. And, those are places that you can enter in and wrestle in beautiful ways with that and work toward healing. And God wants to heal you. He's not going, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're here. Like, he's not like giving you a cosmic eye roll. That's not our God at all, but it can feel that way if that's what it, if things have been weaponized, it can feel that way. And, I would just invite our listeners to maybe consider leaning back in if they have been far away because it's been painful, and again, baby steps, man. It doesn't have to be super fast. God's not like, hurry it up. He's so gracious and patient. The Old Testament is the literal actual evidence of this over and over and over again. I want to transition us to talk about the Christian Trauma Healing Network. I love this organization so very much. And I want to just...
It loves you.
Oh,
it also loves you.
I want to talk about like how you started it and who it's for. Because I think that it doesn't get enough press, and I think more people need to know about it.
Okay. Well, thanks. Well, we are still pretty young. We're a little over 4 years old. And the way Christian Trauma Healing Network began was sort of by accident. In the wake of COVID, I decided to do an online training for helpers. And really, I designed it more for like lay helpers and, just really anybody that was working with a trauma survivor. So even though it was very clinically informed, because that's what I am, um, I I wanted it to be really in a language that was conducive and helpful for folks that maybe didn't go to grad school and learn about counseling. So I just randomly posted something on Facebook and said, "Hey, I'm going to do this training. It's long, like a weekender, Friday night, all day Saturday, if anybody wants to do it." And I had 85 people sign up for it. So then I was like, wow, I guess somebody's hungry for this. And the group was amazing. They were incredible. And it spanned all across. There were pastors, there were advocates, there were people who worked in, I think I had somebody that worked in a homeless shelter, like just people who wanted to learn about trauma from a biblical perspective. But also that was clinically informed and had a lot of, some scientific research alongside it. And so after that training, those 85 people, a lot of them in their feedback said, "Hey, could we make a Facebook group so that we can connect with each other and continue to do consultation and things like that?" So I created a Facebook group, and that Facebook group, that was in July, and that Facebook group by October had reached, I think, 500 people. So I was like, I don't know what's happening. This is weird. And so we just started praying. And the Lord really developed a vision for equipping people helpers in Christ-centered care for trauma survivors. And so it is an equipping ministry. So we don't provide counseling for trauma survivors, but we equip people helpers to do that work from a deeply Christian perspective. So we started with it. Actually, our very first webinar was on spiritual abuse. I just threw it out there to that Facebook group, and they spread the word and things started happening. So we decided to make it a membership-based thing. That's how we pay our bills. I do not like to fundraise. So as a nonprofit, we decided to make it membership-based. Our members pay $15 a month. Or if they want it, all the webinars included every year, they pay $25 a month. And they have access to every single thing we've ever created, which is a lot at this point. We've been going for 4 years. So every month we put out a new content piece. Sometimes it's a worksheet. Sometimes it's a handout. Sometimes it's a guide or an assessment of some sort. Some of them are for the helper themselves. Like we've created assessments for helpers to kind of clue into, am I burning out? Like, am I okay? And assessments that you can do with a counselee to just kind of gauge how's their daily functioning related to their trauma. That kind of stuff. And there's all kinds of resources like that. And then it's called a network because we have a membership and we gather as membership. So we have regular gatherings with our members online. Everything's online right now, where we get together and talk about case studies, or we do sort of like a lunch and learn type situation where there's a little bit of training, but then there's a lot of discussion. And our members have really gained community with each other, knowing this is lonely work. This is hard work. A lot of the folks that are doing this are volunteers in their churches. Like they're volunteering to sit with women after they've experienced, having to leave their spouse or what, like stuff that's so hard. And so being able to be there for each other, care for each other. And it's just been really, really lovely. So there's the networking component. And by the way, a lot of our networking meetings have been recorded. So if you become a member, you can go back and watch every one of those if you want to. And then we developed a certification program. So that original training that I did many years ago, we turned it into a certification. And if you're a licensed mental health professional, you can get CEs for that, which is awesome. We're certified with the National Board of Certified Counselors, so you can get CE credit. But our certification program is basically walking somebody through the trauma healing process, post-trauma. So it's not crisis care. It's healing process. And there's worksheets and there's handouts and there's a case study that you get to do and be in a group with some other people. And gosh, I need to ask, but I want to say, I think in our certification over the past 3 years, we've trained over 1,000 people in that certification program. So, and Tabby gets to be a part of that too as a leader, which is awesome. And so we love it. It's so fun. And it's just I think obviously there's a need, and that's why there's been so much traction. People really want to learn, and they want to think theologically about people's suffering. And then they want to have very practical, because that's the thing. I think sometimes we fall on one side or the other. We're so practical that we miss like the underlying stuff, or we're so theological that it's like, wait, I learned something good, but I have no idea what to do with it. So we're trying to be really practical as well with people. Like, here's how you can actually sit with somebody without creating a formula, which there is none.
Correct.
It's really fun. We love it. We love it.
Yeah. One of the things I love about it myself, obviously having been through the training, having, helped with the training, is that you do get such a cool cross section of people helpers in the church community. And so I've had groups where I had licensed therapists and pastors and, lay helpers and biblical counselors. And it is such a delight because A, we're one body in Christ. We are all going to live in heaven together. So we all should get along. And that it's so encouraging to see so many people who want to understand trauma better because they know they're going to see it in their congregation and they want to love well. And I think that has been a criticism of the Big C church for a long time, is that you don't understand trauma. You're doing things that are harmful. And so to see so many men and women come through this program and want to do it well, want to love well, want to be skilled, that to me is a joy and a delight. And to know that it's not denominational, like it's a bunch of different denominations, a bunch of different like positional locations within a church, whether you're the pastor or a counselor or outside of the church as a counselor or whatever it is, that everybody comes together and says, how can we love well? How can we help people heal? And that is one of my favorite things. So if you're listening and you're a people helper, we will have the Christian Trauma Healing Network information in the show notes. Go check it out. Like, do one of their webinars if you want to, just, get a taste of it and then join. Like, honestly, because it really is a good organization. I've been a member, I think, since the beginning, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And, it has been so wonderful. I've met amazing people. Some of us have gotten to meet in person at different conferences, and that's been super fun. So I just really encourage folks, take a look at these resources. If you are a people helper, this is coach, biblical counselor, licensed counselor, pastor, elder, deacon, lay counselor within the church, Stevens minister, whatever it is that you do, this can really be helpful and such an encouragement. So 10 out of 10, that is my endorsement of it.
That was a great commercial. Appreciate that, Tabby.
Absolutely. Well, Beth, it is always a delight. And honestly, we could probably talk about all kinds of things for like the next 4 hours, and this would be a very long podcast, but we unfortunately have to end. I want to thank you so much for being on Hey Tabby with us and for giving us your wisdom in a million different places, but also on this podcast. It is so good to see your face, and I hope that you'll join us again sometime.
I'd be happy to. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for listening in. Please make sure you go like, subscribe. Please rate this on your favorite podcast platform. It does help people find it. And we will look forward to seeing you here again next time. Thanks for joining me for today's episode of Hey Tabby. If you're looking for a resource that I mentioned in the show and you want to check out the show notes, head on over to tabithawestbrook.com/Hey Tabby. That's HEYTABI, and you can grab it there. I look forward to seeing you next time. Hey friend, can I ask you something kind of personal? Have you ever wondered if healing your sexuality was even possible after everything you've been through? If you have, you're not alone. That is exactly why I wrote Body and Soul Healed and Whole, an invitational guide to healthy sexuality after trauma, abuse, and coercive control. This book is for every Christian woman who has been harmed sexually, whether that happened in childhood, adulthood, or even within your coercively controlling marriage, and you're longing to feel safe in your body again. We talk about the hard stuff: shame, desire, faith, and even questions like, is this sin or is this trauma? You don't have to untangle it alone. If you've ever wished for a guide that is honest, compassionate, and grounded in both scripture and trauma-informed care and does not spiritually bypass, Body and Soul Healed and Whole is for you. It's available now wherever books are sold. Go grab your copy today. You are so worth the healing.